My name is Anna Mitchell. I'm 28 years old, and the day I told my parents I was engaged, they laughed in my face. They said I wasn't worth their money or their time, that only my brother's wedding was worthy of this family's pride. I stayed silent as they spent a fortune on him, shutting me out, mocking me for planning something small. What they didn't know was that my fiancé's family had already prepared everything: the venue, the dress, the guest list, even the cameras. On my wedding day, the truth unraveled on live television, and the family who dismissed me finally realized what they had lost. The night I first told my parents about my engagement, I didn't expect applause or parades. I just wanted their eyes to light up the way they always did when my brother, Daniel, entered a room. I wanted my mother's hand on mine, my father's voice breaking with pride, something to remind me that, despite the years of being overlooked, I still belonged to this family. Instead, what I got was a smirk. We were sitting at the long oak dining table, the one polished so many times it gleamed like glass under the chandelier. My fiancé, Mark, hadn't even been invited. It was just me, my mother stirring her tea with a clink that grated against my nerves, my father leafing through some papers as though my words were background noise, and Daniel leaning back in his chair, half-smile fixed on his lips. "I'm engaged," I said, the words steady but my heart racing. Mark proposed. "We're planning a small ceremony, nothing extravagant. I wanted you to be the first to know." The silence that followed was thick, but not surprised. My mother's lips curled slowly, deliberately. "Engaged?" she repeated, like the word itself tasted bitter. Then she set her spoon down with a click and said, "Don't expect us to waste a dime on you. You should be grateful your brother is getting the wedding this family deserves." I blinked, waiting for her to laugh, to say it was a joke in poor taste. But she just leaned back, satisfied, as if she delivered a truth I should have known all along. My father didn't even lift his eyes. And Daniel, of course, chuckled, shaking his head as though I'd just told the most amusing lie. "You," he said, looking at me the way you might look at someone pretending to be something they'll never be. "Married? What's he buying the ring out of? Pocket change." My chest burned, but I kept my voice calm. "I didn't come here to ask for money. I just wanted your support." My mother's smile sharpened. Support is earned, not handed out. That was it. That was the verdict. Days later, the full scale of their devotion to Daniel's upcoming wedding made itself clear. Invitations embossed with gold leaf arrived at every corner of their network. A luxury venue booked for an entire weekend. A diamond ring for his fiancée that glittered like a crown jewel. Every detail shouted opulence. And through it all, not once did they ask about my plans. Not once did they acknowledge Mark. When I tried to bring him along for a simple family dinner, my mother's voice had turned cold. "This isn't the place for that." She didn't even call him by his name. That. Like he was a stray who'd wandered into the yard. Daniel laughed outright. "Don't embarrass yourself, Anna. Just come alone next time." Every word chipped at me, but Mark's family stood quietly beside me. His mother with her gentle nods, his father's steady presence, his sister's calm words reminding me that silence can be strength. Too, they didn't lash out or try to fight my battles. They simply held their ground, unmovable. And so, as the day of my brother's grand wedding approached, I watched from the shadows. The luxury cars pulling up outside the venue, the designer suits that gleamed under the lights, the endless stream of guests fawning over my parents as though they were royalty. My mother glowed with pride, Daniel basked in the spotlight, and I stood outside that circle, invisible. But what none of them knew was that my story wasn't over. Because when my own wedding day came, my parents ignored the invitations I sent. They mocked the very idea of my small celebration, telling anyone who'd listened that their daughter had settled for less, that she wasn't worth the price of a real wedding. They dismissed it as nothing, a footnote not worth attending. What they didn't know, what I didn't even know until the moment arrived, was the truth Mark's family had been holding close. They had arranged everything. The venue wasn't small, it was breathtaking. A hall that shimmered with crystal chandeliers, its walls draped in soft ivory silk. The decor was flawless, elegant without excess. The dress they had chosen for me fit as though it had been crafted around my very heartbeat. And then came the guest list. Powerful names, people my parents had spent their entire lives trying to impress. Judges, CEOs, social figures who carried weight in every conversation they entered. And when the ceremony began, it wasn't tucked away in some corner where no one would see. It was broadcast live on local TV. The cameras captured every detail, every smile, every vow. They captured Mark's family standing proudly beside me, and more importantly, they captured them calling me their daughter, not just in-law, but daughter. I didn't see my parents that day, but I knew where they were, at home, glued to the television, faces drained of color, realizing that the wedding they had dismissed as worthless had become the most talked about event in town. The attention they had craved, the respect they had wanted, the admiration they had poured into Daniel's lavish day, all of it evaporated in an instant. And that was when it happened. That was the moment they knew they had lost me. The morning after my wedding, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Articles, photos, clips, it was everywhere. Headlines framed it as the event of the season. The daughter-in-law of the Whitman family, married in a ceremony no one had anticipated, surrounded by leaders, executives, and figures people only read about in magazines. Reporters used words like exclusive, dazzling, and unexpected. I sat in bed with Mark, scrolling through it all. His hand rested over mine, steady, reminding me to breathe. I wasn't used to attention like this. I'd grown up learning how to shrink, how to avoid notice, while my brother was paraded through every stage of life. Suddenly, my face was on every screen, and people were calling me the woman everyone had overlooked until now. What I didn't see, but could imagine clearly, was my parents' reaction. I pictured my mother gripping the edge of her chair, unable to understand how I had slipped out of her narrative. I imagined my father's silence, the same silence he'd given me my whole life, now turned on her as though she had failed to manage me. And Daniel, he must have been seething, realizing that the spotlight he'd been groomed to own had been stolen without warning. By afternoon, the calls started. First from relatives who had ignored my invitations, suddenly apologizing for miscommunications. Then from neighbors who had heard whispers of the ceremony, but hadn't believed them. Then, finally, from my mother. I let it ring. Again. The name flashing across my phone screen, her voice spilling into voicemail after voicemail, each one growing sharper. The first was sweet, too sweet, her tone pretending warmth. Anna, darling, what a surprise. We had no idea it was going to be such an occasion. Call us back. We should celebrate. The second carried irritation. Why didn't you tell us who was attending? Do you realize what this looks like, you shutting us out? The third revealed the truth. You've embarrassed this family. You think you're clever, parading around with people who don't know who you really are. But don't forget, you're still our daughter. Her words hung in the air long after I set the phone down. Still our daughter. Not pride, not joy, a claim, a possession they feared losing. Mark noticed my silence. They'll try harder, he said calmly. They've lost control, and people like that don't handle it well. He was right. The next day, my father appeared at our doorstep. No call, no warning. He stood there in his tailored suit, the same one he wore to corporate dinners, his expression measured. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something. Maybe nerves, maybe regret, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Anna, he said, stepping inside before I could decide whether I wanted him there. His eyes scanned the house, not as a father visiting his daughter's home, but as a man assessing territory. Mark greeted him politely, offered him coffee, but my father waved it off. We need to talk. The conversation wasn't an apology. It was strategy. He spoke about family unity, about managing appearances, about how rumors spread if we're not careful. He wanted me to understand that my wedding had changed things, not for me, but for them. You've drawn attention, he said. Good attention, yes, but it reflects on all of us. If people see distance between us, they'll ask questions. Questions we don't want. I stared at him, waiting for a single word that sounded like love, or pride, or even acknowledgement. But none came. All I heard was calculation, fear of losing the upper hand in the image they had built. "Why now?" I asked. "Why are you here when last month you told me I wasn't worth supporting?" He flinched, but barely. "Your brother's wedding was already planned. It wouldn't have been right to divide resources." "Resources," I repeated, almost laughing. "That's what you call it." Mark stepped closer, his presence steady at my side, his silence louder than my father's words. My father's eyes flicked to him, then back to me. He seemed to weigh something, then finally said, "You need to come to dinner. Both of you. Tomorrow night." It wasn't a request. It was a summons. The following evening, walking into my parents' home felt different. For years, I had entered that house shrinking, careful not to draw attention. Now, I walked in knowing they couldn't ignore me anymore. The living room was set like a stage, polished silver laid out, candles lit, Daniel and his wife already seated, looking irritated. My mother rose when she saw us, her smile rehearsed. "Anna," she said brightly, almost too brightly. "Mark, we're so glad you could join us." It was performance. Every gesture calculated, every word dripping with false warmth. She asked about the ceremony, about the guests, pretending she hadn't ridiculed me days before. My father steered the conversation toward connections, asking for details about who Mark's family knew, what businesses they were tied to, which doors had now opened. Daniel couldn't hold his tongue. "You really think this makes you special?" he asked, leaning forward, his eyes sharp. "One flashy wedding and suddenly you're better than everyone? Don't forget, I'm still the one carrying this family name." The table went silent. My mother's hand tightened on her glass. My father's jaw set. Mark didn't flinch. He simply placed his fork down and looked Daniel in the eye. "No one's competing, unless you feel threatened." Daniel's face reddened, but my parents quickly shifted the subject, too aware of how fragile their illusion of harmony was. They wanted control back, but it slipped further with every attempt. When dinner ended, my mother pulled me aside. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. You're still part of us. Don't let them turn you against your family." For the first time, I met her gaze without fear. "Family is supposed to stand with you. You made it clear I was on my own." Her smile cracked, but she didn't answer. She simply let go of my arm and watched as Mark and I left the house. By the time we got home, messages were already spreading online. Photos of my parents at Daniel's wedding compared side by side with the coverage of mine. People were talking about the difference, about the coldness in their faces when it came to me. Whispers started that maybe the golden family wasn't so golden after all. The weeks after that dinner turned into a storm. My parents tried to pull me back into their version of the family, not with affection, but with demands. Invitations arrived suddenly, always framed as obligations. Charity galas, business dinners, luncheons with people they wanted to impress. Each time, I refused. The more I said no, the harder they pushed. Daniel escalated faster. He called me one evening, his voice sharp, accusing me of stealing attention that was never meant for me. "You don't deserve this," he snapped. "You think those people actually care about you? They care about Mark's last name. You're nothing without it." I didn't answer. I let him hear the silence before I ended the call. His anger didn't rattle me anymore. It only confirmed how far the balance had shifted. The breaking point came when my parents tried one last move. They organized a gathering at their house, a celebration for Daniel and his wife, and they spread word through the community that I would be attending. They hadn't asked me. They simply assumed I would show up, stand beside them, and play the role they needed. When I didn't arrive, the whispers began. Guests asked where I was, and instead of controlling the narrative, my parents looked exposed. People compared their cold treatment of me with the way Mark's family openly embraced me. The contrast was obvious now to everyone. Their perfect image was cracking. That night, my mother called again, her voice raw. "Anna, you're destroying us. After everything we've built, you're tearing it apart." I finally answered. "I didn't destroy anything. You did when you decided I wasn't worth standing beside." The silence that followed was long. Then she said quietly, "You'll regret this." But she was wrong. The next morning, Mark's family invited me into a conversation I hadn't expected. They had seen the pressure mounting, the way my parents tried to use me as a tool, and they had decided it was time to make things clear. With their influence, they arranged a public statement during an event that everyone important in town would attend. That night, under the lights of a crowded ballroom, Mark's father raised a glass and introduced me not as a daughter-in-law, but as his daughter. He spoke of my strength, of how I had become part of their family with grace, of how proud they were to stand with me. Cameras caught every word. Guests listened, many nodding, some whispering, but no one missed the point. My parents were there. I saw their faces as the words sank in. My mother's smile didn't reach her eyes. My father's jaw tightened, his hands locked behind his back. Daniel looked furious, but helpless. In that moment, the divide was complete. They had wanted me invisible, but now I was standing in a place they could never touch. The respect they had chased their whole lives had shifted, and it no longer revolved around them. When the evening ended, I didn't go to them. I walked out with Mark and his family, leaving my parents and brother behind in the crowd, still clinging to the shell of the image they had tried to protect. That was the last time I saw them in public. They didn't call again. They didn't try to force another reunion. Slowly, they faded into the background, still respected in some circles, but no longer the center of anything. And me, I didn't need their approval anymore. I had something stronger, love, loyalty, and a family who had chosen me, not out of duty, but out of conviction.